Welcome, dear learners. As you are a part of the PG Diploma in Women's and Gender Studies, now we will be talking about the third course of this program, MWG 003, Constructing Gender Through Arts and Media. I myself, Dr. Himadri Roy, the course coordinator for this course, and we have among us the panelist, Professor Anu Aneja, from the school itself. She will also be talking about in this what exactly the course talks about. Now when we see the course has lots of things into it. With the title itself, you must be wondering what exactly gender has in arts and media. Arts, as you have seen, lots of things. It includes media, it includes lots of things from the TV to the film to your everyday life. Now in this we are going to understand gender properly through films, through theatre, through performances, through sculpture, painting, journalism, and even architecture. For example, the home you stay or the houses you look nearby, they also have something to reveal, and how they reveal about the gender has been talked about. Let me give you the score structure before beginning everything. The first block 1, is about gender and literature. The second block talks about gender, film and cinema. The third block, gender and performativity, and the fourth block is visualizing gender. Now in all these blocks we have several things to discuss. We begin with the first block. Professor Anu Aneja.
Let's look at the very first block of this course, which is gender and literature. Gender and literature has 4 units, as you can see. Unit 1 is ways of reading and interpreting. Unit 2 is ways of writing. Unit 3 is on critical approaches, and Unit 4 is on feminism and deconstruction. So what is this block about, and what can you expect to learn from this block? In this block, mainly we will be looking at the interconnections between gender and literature. Different ways of writing and reading, different ways of interpreting, but all from a gender perspective. So the first unit will start with the issue of language, which is an extremely important issue. Before we talk about literature, we have to talk about language, because if you think about it, what is literature made of? What is the material of literature? Isn't it language? So we start by talking about how language is defined and how language defines gender, how language shapes gender. Sometimes language can be used as a medium to dominate over a group. Then we will look at how language is used by men, how language is used by women. Is language used in a gendered way, or is everyone using language in the same way? These are some of the questions that will be generated, that you will be encouraged to think about. The block also looks at writing by women. Has writing by women, that is literature by women, over the centuries across cultures, has it been marginalized, and if so, what are the reasons for doing so? How have women writers in more contemporary times tried to revise this literature? Also you will address the whole issue of canonical texts. What is the literary canon? What kinds of works, what kinds of authors are considered to be the dominant authors or the dominant trends in literature across the centuries? Every nation, every culture seems to have its own literary canon. Very often women writers do not get included in these literary canons. So the whole question of canonical texts, what should be included, who decides what should be included, who decides what gets excluded, what gets marginalized, all of these issues will be discussed in this block. Also the notion of the woman writer, the term woman and writer. Some women resist this coupling of the term woman writer and want to be known only as writers, whereas some women writers embrace it because they very well want to be known as writers who are women. That is, they want to bring their gendered identity to the forefront. These are other questions that this block will look at. Also the link between gender and genre. is there a particular way in which women write, and also is there a particular genre? For instance, are women more drawn to the novel, the short story, or poetry? Does poetry become a more receptive genre for women as opposed to men? Are there certain genres which are more acceptable for women writers and men writers, and also in the context of the market? What does the market expect? Does the market expect that women write in certain genres, that is only poetry or only short stories, and does the market expect that only men can be novelists? These are also questions that the whole block on gender and literature will look at. We will look at feminist viewpoints, resistance to certain trends, stereotypes, also the notion of interpretation. So this block will introduce you to three main ideas, which is reading, writing and interpreting. So how you read from a gendered perspective, how you write or can write from a gendered perspective, and how you can interpret from a gendered perspective. So here you will come across terms such as gynocentric criticism. These of course will be explained much further in the course material that you will be receiving. Finally, we will move towards deconstruction and feminism, and in this unit you will look at the whole notion of post-structuralism. But in order to introduce you to the notion of post-structuralism, it's very important for you to understand where post-structuralism originates from. So the unit will start with literary theories history from the early part of the 20th century, that is new criticism, then it will move to structuralism, and then to post-structuralism. All of these terms will be explained in the unit. So don't worry if you don't understand the terms right away when you are watching this program. When you read, you will understand what these terms mean. The unit will cover major post-structuralist writers like Roland Barthes and Jacques Derrida, and it will talk about some of the alignments between deconstruction and feminism. That is, in what ways has feminism been able to take advantage of the deconstructive perspective and use it to its advantage, but also in what ways feminism has a degree of dissatisfaction with deconstruction. So what are the alignments, what are the misalignments? So essentially you will get a broad overview of gender and literature through theoretical perspectives and through critical perspectives in this block.
Now coming to the second block, that is gender, film and cinema. This also has 4 units. The first unit, I'll talk on the first unit first, gaze, eye of the camera. Now with the title itself you must be wondering, this has lots to do with technicalities of the films. Now what are these technicalities? What are the concepts? How a cinema is an art? All these things you will be reading in this unit. Beside this, you will also understand how to read a film. What are the modes of reading the film? What are the modes of studying a cinema? Now these structures that make cinema an art will be dealt in this unit. Now in this unit you will talk about cinematic structures, which are basically syntagmatic and narrative. Both these will be discussed at a stage with a detailed descriptions in the unit. The third point that I have to keep in your mind, how to look at a cinema. Now when you see a film, going to a theater, cinema hall or something, now or at a home, now when you see that, what do you see? How do you understand? Now these sort of, it has lots of technicalities behind it. The abstraction, the modes of discourse, the rapport de productions. Now all these things will be given a detailed descriptions, keeping in mind that this is a gender perspective. When we talk about this, we have to see how a director whose gender can be made out through the films that you watch. Now as a spectator also, you will understand, as a spectator, as a woman spectator or as a man spectator, what do you see in a film? Now these are all various types of things that you will read in this unit. Second unit, that is representations. Now in representations itself, we will define what is representations in cinematic art. Now debating from Plato, the theorist Plato, to the theorist Edward Said. So you can understand that it encompasses from the ancient time to the modern time through different forms of representations in art. Gender representations will always be on Indian cinema because we are dealing mostly with the Indian theorists over here. So the entire concept will be discussed on Indian cinema. Now on representations, we will also see the same-sex portrayals in the films. Also along with it, we'll see the masculine representations, beside also studying the feminine representations of a film, which are women-centric films, which are same-sex films, which are male-based films. There are lots of things which we film, lots of categories of films which have been made for ages, now 100 years of film productions. All these things you will read in this representation. The third unit, censorship, spectatorship and critical analysis. In this, we begin the unit with what is exactly censorships. Now to understand censorship, we have to know what are the regulatory bodies controlling the censorship, like CBFC, which is Central Board of Film Certification, who gives a certificate to release a film publicly. Now this will be dealt entirely with the cultural perspectives. What are the cultural effects to grade a film or certificate a film accordingly. Now you might have noted that lots of films have different certificates like U, UA or A. All this has a different meaning. Now you will, when you go through the unit, you will understand what exactly this means. Beside that, you will also see the alternative measures or systems of certification that is prevalent these days. Now when after censorship, we come directly to the spectatorship. As a spectator, as a female spectator, what do you expect from the film? What do you see in the film? These all will be talked about. We will also see the images of spectators in the films. We will see that how a female spectator looks into obscenity, or the obscenity is viewed by the male spectators. Similarly, how pornography is seen by all the different categories or different gender in the society. The last unit, queering cinema. This is very interesting with the name itself. Probably you have already studied in the first course itself, MWG 001, Theories of Women's and Gender Studies, where you have studied about queer theory. Now keeping those theories in mind, you have to study this queer cinema. Now how do we queering cinema happens? Those elements will be dealt in this. Now what exactly are the narrative structures for a queer cinema? Keeping queer cinema in mind, it will be only dealing with the alternative sexuality people in the society. Now we will only focus on the Indian perspective, the history from where it began, after independence till the 70s, what were the modes of representation of femininity and masculinity, as well as what were the representations of same-sex portrayal in the films. Then you will come across after the golden era till the liberalization period, what were the focus on. Now what were the focus on the same-sex or the sexuality perspective. And the post-liberal, when we talk about, we will talk about how new films or the new genre films has been portrayed very widely after the liberalization. Now the unit will end, the whole block will end with a vernacular queer cinema. We might have been very familiar with the Bollywood concepts of the cinema, but there are vernacular concepts where femininity, masculinity and the same sex or the alternative sexuality has been portrayed widely. The block will end with the vernacular perspective or the regional perspective. Then we move into the block 3. That is gender and performativity. Now in performativity, when we talk about performance, do we see women performing more or men performing more? Now in this we have 3 units: construction of traditions, gender and performance, and stage and theatre. In gender construction, coming to the first unit itself, performance or gender, it will have a historical perspective from the pre-Vedic to the modern period. In this, how at the Vedic, pre-Vedic period, how women performed, how men performed, why only women were allowed to perform, why only men were allowed to perform. We will also focus on performing artists, women as a performing artist. We'll also see men as a performing artist in the early literature, like taking the concepts from Natya Shastra. We will have the status of Ganikas and Apsaras. You will also come across Devdasi, the traditions of Devdasi during the ancient period. Coming to the medieval India, we will talk about Turko, Persian and Mughal rulers. Under them, what were the perception concept of performance? Was it only the Tawayaf tradition or the courtesan traditions? These things will be dealt, and coming to the modern period of the 21st century and the pre-colonial and post-colonial, and the unit will end with that. Coming to the second unit, gender and performativity, we will begin with what is doing gender means at performance. Like if you are a woman, how do you perform at home? Performance in your everyday life, how you dress, how you move, what are your attributes, what is your gait, what is your way of talking, your behavioral pattern, all this will be dealt over here. We will also see that how rituals and sex role are displayed at every moment of life through the performances we are talking about. And in this, you will see that when we talk about performances, at once certain things, certain aspects which men also do, which are supposed to be in the patriarchal concept, thought to be women's role. These also are happening. The shift of the sexual roles, the ambiguity will be dealt in this unit. The third unit, or the stage and theatre, itself talks about a lot in the concept of what are the kinds of theatre do we have. We'll begin with the entire ambience. Is that ambience suited for a gender perspective, on the gender's perspective? We'll begin with kinds of theatres, from the classical, the epic, the didactic to the modern form of theatre of the oppressed. We will move then to the interventions of stage. How is stage, the structure of a stage, how it is well defined, or what are the definitions for defining the stage itself. And then the stage performers. What are the roles of a woman? What are the roles of a man? Why do they perform and how do they perform? All this will be studied. And as a spectator, we will also see the norms and traditions of the assertions of these theatrical performances on the gender's perspective. This will wrap up the entire block. Then moving to the last block of this course, visualizing gender. It begins very interestingly from the journalism perspective, from the print and other media, which we'll talk about. The unit begins with communication. What is communication? The definition of it, the forms of it, what are communication medias, the conventional thought about it, the conventional perception about it. Then coming to the contemporary perspective of it. What is the role of the media in your life? Or how do you see media as a playing an important role in the society? Does media has role of constructing social realities or not? These will all be gender specific, and this will be dealing in this unit. The second unit, gender on television. Now you, all of you, most of you must be observing television or watching television very keenly. Now when you watch the television, you will see how gender is been portrayed in Indian television. We will deal in this unit about this in a different way, with a historical perspective. When did television began in our country? How did it began? What were the roles of women? What were the gender perspective? And how, we will come gradually to the cable TV generation, where we will see how the soap operas began and what did they bring the impact and change in the society. The third unit, the painting and sculpture. This has two parts. The first part will be dealing with the West, where we will see only the Renaissance and Renaissance period and after that. And the second part deals with Indian perspective. Renaissance art, we will see what role does religion have on it. That from the divine masculine figurines to the feminine figurines. We will also see male nudity. We will also discuss the portrayals of sufferings through religious paintings and sculptures. We will deal with in the western part, we will deal with painters and artists like Michelangelo, Botticelli, Caravaggio, Titian, and coming to the modern period of Rembrandt and Vermeer. So we will see all these artists, what does their work represents. And coming to the second part of it, the Indian, will begin from the prehistoric rock paintings and sculptures and come to the ancient Indian cave paintings like Ellora, Ajanta or Bagh, or for example Sittanavasar. In the ancient, we will also talk about the sculptures. The famous Khajuraho temple complex will deal with Konark complexes as well as Kamadeva complexes. Coming to the medieval period, we'll begin with Mughal paintings to coming directly to the Madhubani paintings. So you can see that the Mughal painting, what are the Mughal paintings impact, like the Kangra paintings, how did that get affected, how the Rajputana paintings get affected, how the Mysore and Tanjore painting got affected. Even for example, we will talk about the folk paintings also, like Madhubani paintings. And lastly, we will talk about the colonial Indian paintings and sculptures. The concepts of Bharat Mata, how did that become important, and what were the painting concept of Bharat Mata after the independence. And after independence, the whole unit will wrap up with the portrayal of different modern artists, the modern paintings and sculptures will be talked about. The fourth unit, gender and architecture. As I was telling at the beginning of the short, that you have seen where the place you stay, your home, your society, your colony, everything is so gender specific. Every place, every space has been defined to a particular gender. Now one cannot move beyond that. This will be dealt in this unit, gender and architecture. And the last unit, engendering new media, cyberspace. Cyberspace itself today has become so prominent that most of us have an email account. Now when we talk about emailing or the internet concept, what impact did it bring? What are the possibilities of bringing this into the life of a man or a woman, of a life of a human being in the society? The social impact of cyber media, the cyberspace, how did the space among became patriarchal, that how it de-shaded or shaded off all the norms that could be broken through social networking sites. We'll aim that the entire block will wrap up with that. Now after this, we'll see the interconnections which Professor Anu Aneja will be talking about.
So far you have had an overview of all the 4 blocks of this course, and as you can see, these 4 blocks have covered 4 very important concepts which are literature, film and cinema, performativity and visual arts. So let's look at the interconnections now between these ideas. Firstly, when you read this course material, try to make linkages with the media world. Try to see the whole concept of the media world from a gendered perspective. That is, what is the role of gender within all of these mediums. Secondly, make theoretical connections not only within the blocks but also within courses. Between the blocks, you can think about making connections between literature and film and cinema and performativity, and finally visual arts. From a gendered perspective, when we talk about literature or when we talk about film or when we talk about performativity or when we talk about women painters and male painters or architects who are either women or men, are there some similar themes or constraints when we are looking at the gender perspective in all of these different fields or areas? So make connections between the various blocks of this particular course, but also it is very important that you make connections between this course and other courses. So try to make connections between the theoretical concepts that you have already looked at in the first course and also in the second course in gender and power. You would have read about the notion of power and empowerment. So think about the notion of power in relationship to the arts and media. Does it play a role, and if so, what role does it play? How empowered are women or how empowered are men in society to function as writers, as performers, as artists, etc. you can also finally make connections between this course and the fourth course, which is gendered bodies and sexualities. It will also be very useful for you to think about the concept of the gendered body as an aesthetic body, as a body which is a writing body, an artistic body, that is the artist's body, but also the body, the female body as a representation in art. So think about the notion of the body as a gendered body, but also from the perspective of artistic representation or aesthetic representation. So you will be able to make all these connections when you read the material in course 3 and also in course 4. And finally, make links between this course and of course your own artistic or other hobbies. We encourage you to do so, so that you get maximum out of this course, so that you enjoy this course material. So if you are watching, you're fond of watching films or television, or you're very fond of painting or sculpture or any other hobby, photography for instance, that you have, try to bring in your own hobbies, your own experiences, or if you perhaps know someone in your family or amongst your peers or friends who is who is a photographer or a painter or an artist, you can even go and talk to them and talk to them about these issues, these gendered issues, and how they impact their professional life or their artistic life or their hobbies or your own, of course. So these are all the interconnections that we would like you to make.
Before I want to wrap up, I want to say that apply what Professor Aneja told you now. Try to apply these themes, these concepts that you have learnt into your real life. Not only discussing among your friends, not only discussing with the counselors, but also applying them and seeing every form of arts and media in your everyday life, from your home to the society around.
Finally, the role of check your progress questions and unit end questions in the course material, which is true of every course in this program, of course, but in the context of this particular course, we would like to tell you that please do try to attempt the check your progress questions. There are some very interesting activities that have been provided to you inside the course material, and you will find it very helpful to use these activities like watching a film, reading a novel, critically analyzing it from a gendered perspective. These will all be very helpful for you in terms of preparing for assignments and exams. And also the units, all the units end with some unit end questions. Do attempt these, because these will be a sort of practice for you in terms of how to write good essays in the examinations. The suggested readings which are provided at the end of the units will also be very helpful in adding to your knowledge of this course material.
Hope this you will enjoy what you have learnt throughout this course, and if you have any queries, please do feel free to contact me, Dr. Himadri Roy, in the email ID himadriou@ignou.ac.in. You can contact anytime or leave your queries. They will be answered without any hesitation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.